opinions and forecasts on major issues of the day.
GE is proud to support the McLaughlin Group. From medical systems to broadcasting. GE, we bring good things to life.
Issue 1, Clinton, south of the border.
Our hemisphere is growing closer every day.
In an effort to make the hemisphere closer still, this week President Clinton went to Venezuela, Brazil, and Argentina. The U.S. is doing less business with South America, while Europe is doing more, stealing our doorstep market. The president wanted to reverse this trend. Sunday, Monday, Caracas. Venezuela is the #1 supplier of oil to the U.S. No longer Saudi Arabia. Venezuela supplies 18%, almost 1 out of 5 barrels of U.S. oil. This week, President Clinton signed an agreement which will bring even more Venezuelan oil to the U.S. By the way, among those in the welcoming party for the president and the First Lady this week was Irina Saez, the popular 35-year-old mayor of the Chacao district in Caracas. Saez was Miss Universe in 1981, and according to her large current 98 presidential poll lead, Saez may well be the next president of Venezuela. Tuesday, Brasilia. Brazil is the 5th largest country in the world in both land mass and population, and occupies at least 1/2 of the land mass of South America. Brazil is also becoming an economic powerhouse. Some think even posing the first real challenge to the U.S. for hemispheric dominance. Its economy is growing at an annual rate of over 3%. And even more noticed by the U.S., imports from Europe are growing by almost 2% a year, whereas imports from the U.S. have shrunk by more than 2%. Fast track, where are you? Wednesday, Thursday, Buenos Aires. Argentina is another emerging economic power, undergoing an amazing economic rebound since 1990. Inflation dropping from almost 5,000% to 5%. Although presently suffering from necessary belt tightening, in '96, Argentina's economy grew by 4.2%, and it's expected to double that rate this year. Except for a few Yankee parasite protests in Brazil and one violent leftist spasm in Buenos Aires, the South American countries were polite but cool to the president. While trade within South America itself is booming because of regional trade pacts, $16 billion last year, many of these flowering South American economies are worried that expanding trade with the likes of the U.S. could stifle their own exuberant economic growth. Clearly, we have done too little to recognize South America and woo this market. Meanwhile, American reporters traveling with the president practically ignored the substance of his trip, concentrating their questions on Mr. Clinton's fundraising scandals back home, to the embarrassment of the president's superpower status, and to the economic detriment of the nation itself. Question, how is this week's trip by the president to South America best described? Freddie, the Beetlebums.
Overdue. You know, we have, as you pointed out, we, the U.S., the press, the various presidents have given South America short shrift over the years. That's been the traditional U.S. stance. But now with democracies and free markets flourishing all over South America, except for Cuba, we do this at our economic peril. Contrary to what you said, this was not a trip where significant substantive matters were decided. It wasn't a hardball, but it was a great goodwill trip. And you didn't show Clinton particularly at that town forum where he was really dazzling. I mean, he is very good at making people feel important. I think the trip was a great success.
Oh.
Well, the trip was a great success if you watched your footage and if you listened to Fred Barnes. But if you were an average person sitting in your living room, this trade mission came across about as successful as George Bush's trade mission to Japan. I mean, you saw the president being pelted with the car being pelted with excrement, and you heard the questions about campaign finance. So I think as a sales mission for a domestic audience about trade, I don't think it worked. You did leave out Mrs. Clinton, who really did steal the show in speaking to an audience of mostly women in a Catholic country, mentioning family planning, and she got extraordinarily positive response.
Well, I hope you'll apologize for my oversight the next time you go rollerblading with her. Let me ask you this, Patrick. What's the answer to my question? How do you best describe his mission? Would you describe it as mañana, too little, too late? We've been too little, too late in that hemisphere?
I'd describe it as 1/3 junketing, 1/3 pole boosting, and 1/3 he wants his place in history to be this global trade agreements as well as NAFTA expansion. John, you're a victim, though, of terrible media hype. Since NAFTA, the U.S. surplus with all the Latin American nations except Mexico has gone up 700% from $1 billion to $8 billion. Secondly, the entire economy of Latin America is roughly 1/5 of the U.S. economy. Any expansion of NAFTA or something like that, it gives them access to the greatest market on earth and gives us access to these Mickey Mouse little markets in Latin America.
Isn't it painful just listening to it?
Isolationism at uber alles. Look, I think...
Talk to him about the global economy. Will you talk to him about the law of spontaneous order and bionomics? Will you talk to him about that?
He is incorrigible, right? Uneducable.
All right,
about
please
this subject.
continue.
Okay. The fact is that if Clinton hoped that this trip would help him with fast track, I think that the new communications team in the White House blew it because the stories just didn't get, just a second, the stories did not get back here. Now, when Clinton
What do you
gets back,
mean by that?
Because if he wants to sell fast track, he may lose fast track in Congress. So he should have been making, just a minute, he should have been making news down there about, that got played back here about fast track. Now, what he's got to do when he gets back is to say, I have seen Mercosur, which is the new, yes, and we've got to beat it.
You're talking about Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay.
And Venezuela.
And Venezuela league together.
Right, league
they
together.
They are forming their own trade
and
pact
we
and
have
telling
got,
us in
and
so
they
many
want,
words.
and if we don't negotiate with Chile, which is a free market economy, and get them into a free trade pact with us, which we need fast track for, Chile will go with Mercosur.
Chile could have led us into the whole cone of South America.
John, here's the problem with
what... when are you... Go ahead.
Well, here's the problem with what Morton was saying. PR from this trip was not going to get fast track through Congress. It's going to take, one, the business community leaning on Republicans, and it probably will, and they get enough Republican votes, and Bill Clinton himself leaning on and buying off enough Democratic votes.
Look, that's exactly what Clinton's going to do. He's going to buy the votes in the Congress the way he did on NAFTA. But, John, with regard to Mercosur, they've got a nice little trade deal down there. It's a good one. What the United States should do in this thing is get our investors inside that and not try to trade with people who got wages about 1/5 of America's
becoming
wages.
a free trader?
No, you get inside it.
The problem is, you see, the culture now down there, they always had the Yankee go-home mentality, but now it's taken out a special edge because they're being wooed by Europe heavily, and they see that they're being treated better by Europe than their own neighbors in the North. They also see that nothing has gone forward with Chile, and that had been fruited around for a while.
Wait a minute. What's going to happen with Mercosur is they are going to require you to place your plant in the Mercosur countries, or else you'll have to pay a 15% tariff, which the Europeans are ready to do.
Exit question, multiple choice quiz. Who bears the most blame for killing U.S. export prospects to Latin America and opening the door to Europe? A, unions. B, environmentalists. C, Ross Perot and Pat Buchanan. D, Clintonomics. E, Mexico. You know what Mexico means in this regard? What does it mean?
Not much to me.
Well, what influence did it have as far as our doing anything with...
The fact that NAFTA was not the unbridled success that everybody pretended it was going to be.
It's a small success. Look, John, also the bailout. Of course, but the bailout, it turned out to work fairly well. Mexico's already paid the whole thing back.
Which one do you see of those as most contributing to
NAFTA, to all of Latin America? The one that's going to be hurt worst is Mexico.
Clinton should have long ago pushed for fast track.
Clintonomics? Clintonomics too?
Clinton? No, not Clintonomics. Clinton.
I'm talking about the currency reforms in the 80s. I'm talking about the strong dollar. It's a lot cheaper for them to buy from Europe, and that probably more than anything else, if the truth be known, is why they are favoring Europe. Issue 2, the Clinton tapes or film noir.
I have known John Huang a very long time. At least to be as young as we are. We've And when he told me this event was going to unfold as it has tonight, I wasn't quite sure I believed him. But he never told me anything that didn't come to pass.
It was movie time in Washington this week. The White House released 66 more videotapes of 158 Clinton fundraising events, a film festival's worth of Clinton-Gore fundraising excesses. And the president appears at some of the gatherings with embarrassing co-stars, chief of whom is John Huang. Lest you forget, here's a rundown of Huang's professional achievements. Item: illegal donations from Asia, brokered by Huang. DNC forced to return $1.5 million worth of them. Item: Huang sought to launder $250,000 through phony political contributions moved via Asian American businessmen. Item: to gain the number 3 position at the U.S. Department of Commerce, Huang was granted top security clearance without the required FBI background check. Almost unheard of. At the same time, get this, Huang was still employed by the Lippo Group, an Indonesian-based conglomerate with a web of ties to China. And get this, Huang received 35 classified intelligence briefings in that office. Item: the FBI is now looking at John Huang's contacts with the Embassy of China. The FBI is probing, with the help of electronic counterintelligence gathering, Chinese government efforts to tilt the American political system by funneling illegal foreign money into the 1996 U.S. elections, including the presidential race, for which Huang was duly thanked.
And I'd like to thank my longtime friend John Huang for being so effective. Frankly, he's been so effective, I was amazed that you were all cheering for him tonight after he's been around in his aggressive efforts to help our cause.
Republicans were quick to seize on the tapes. There's more reason for Janet Reno to appoint an independent counsel.
And I think that this is new and credible evidence that the president at least had knowledge of Mr. Huang's activities.
But the Attorney General disagreed.
There is nothing in the statement that you provided to me just now that indicated that the president had any knowledge of any... Well, that the power of the federal government is not directed towards people in an unwarranted manner.
But, Madam...
Do you agree with General Reno that there is, quote, unquote, nothing to warrant an independent counsel to be found in the one...
or going out and getting money for him. Unless you can prove that he knew that John Huang had exceeded his authority in some way, you don't have anything on the president. So I have sat through, as a reporter, many of these fundraisers. I've heard presidents call clowns national treasures. And, you know, the hype in politics is what this is all about.
John, first off, they got Kondracke in there, and Chung, and Tree, and Wong, and the Indonesian gardener in Riyadh.
Who's Kondracke?
It's like, she's Paula Kondracke. I think she's out of the country, too. This is a rerun of America's Most Wanted on these tapes. But the key thing, John, is, and you missed it, the key thing is Clinton on these tapes concedes the fact that all this soft money has been used to build him up in the polls, which is de facto illegitimate and illegal and a violation of the campaign.
He said, oh, wait a minute,
He said twice, in December and May.
In December, he said, we've figured out a way to collect not $1,000 contributions, but $50,000 and $100,000 contributions, so I won't have to draw down my campaign account, which is limited by law.
Did he say that on the tape?
Yes. I mean, it's merely a smoking gun. Right, no, and it's awful.
Hold on, let me hear.
Dick Morris has said the same thing in his book. Bob Woodward has discovered the same thing in his reporting for the Washington Post, that Clinton actually himself wrote some of these ads that appeared and were paid for by soft money that was not supposed to help his campaign, but was
the so-called issue
ad. Yeah, look, and there's one other thing about Janet Reno's testimony. It was very inconsistent. On the one hand, she was talking about, gee, we have to have enough evidence to get a jury to convict. That's not what you need to name a special counsel. All you need is some evidence of possible criminal activity. You don't need to prove
May have
anything
taken
to
place.
trigger
wait
an
a
independent
second.
counsel.
The so-called issue advocacy advertising. First of all, to expect that the leader of the Democratic Party would have no say over what these ads are like is ridiculous. And second, as long as those ads do not say, vote for President Clinton,
please.
they are legal. Wait, let me finish.
No.
They are legal. And the
They are not
Republican
legal.
National Committee ran ads, biographical ads about Bob Dole with a little mention of legislation at the end. And those were perfectly legal. This goes on both
They may not
sides.
be
It's
legal
a
either.
huge
Question
loophole.
here-
If you don't
question
like
here-
it, change the law.
Question here is, did Bill Clinton steal the election of 1996 by
No.
cheating on it deliberately? Okay, he would have won anyhow.
That's right.
He would have won anyhow, but you cannot run candidate ads using soft money from the DNC.
Look, yeah,
it is a direct violation of law.
Pat is exactly right. There was a conspiracy.
The law is a gray area.
Just a second. There is.
Don't wave
there
your
is-
finger at me
there
again,
is-
please. Thank you.
Each of these guys, Dole and Clinton both signed a pledge saying, I will only spend the amount of money that I'm allowed under law, right?
And they both
then they proceeded to go,
violated
Do you think?
They
But
both
it's a
violated
gray-
the law.
No, but they
Okay.
violated it through money that is
Okay.
used for party building. It is legal. It's a
Okay,
loophole.
it's a Janet on her own.
Yeah, the president is quoted in an AP story as saying he has taken great pains to avoid talking to you. He said, quote, I've gone out of my way to have no conversation with her about this or frankly anything else, which I'm not sure is so good. Do you find a inherent conflict of interest in the president feeling unwilling to talk to you about anything?
I have the sense in the 4 years that I have been in office that any time I need to talk to the president about any matter that I think requires the president's attention, that I can do so. I have been able to do so, and I believe that I have no sense that I am not able to do so. And
Well,
I
I'm
do
sure
not
he will take your call, but the question is, will he make a call to you?
Question, is Janet Reno's isolation from the White House conducive to the nation's best interest? I ask you, Morton Kondracke.
Well, it does give her the opportunity to say that she is acting independently, therefore she does not have a conflict of
Well,
interest.
suppose the
Therefore,
president wants to know about civil rights. Or suppose he wants to ask her something about drug trafficking.
He can
Can you
call-
imagine JFK being unable to
John,
call
I'll
Bobby
tell you
Kennedy?
something. John.
I mean, this is nuts.
No.
It is.
Well,
Look, John,
It's
I go,
nuts. It's absolute
John,
nuts.
John, it is nuts. But let me go back to something Eleanor said. Just on the basis of what you said, Eleanor, that this may have been a loophole, it may have been a violation of the law, that right there, in looking at Bill Clinton and his evasion of the campaign finance spending ceilings, is enough right there to automatically trigger an independent counsel.
No, it is
Doesn't
not.
mean-
You're not going to find a prosecutor who's going to be willing to go into law on that, and it's been abused
Go into
in
law?
several...
It is the
go
law.
into court.
Just
Go
get
in,
back
it's
to
been
Reno.
abused
No,
in several areas.
they don't have to go into court. They just have to
talk
investigate.
about
Let Eleanor
Janet
finish.
Reno. I want to talk about Janet Reno. She looks into the camera. She's forthright. She takes responsibility. And she wasn't Bill Clinton's first choice, and she is independent.
She didn't take responsibility.
If he wants to know about anything else
John,
that's going on, he can talk to
this
Charles
woman
Ruff, who talks to her.
She's not only isolated from the White House, she is isolated from reality. You have got this tremendous conspiracy staring her in the face, and she's looking over the Pendleton Act of 1873.
You mean
this
her,
is unbelievable.
You mean her narrow interpretation of
tremendous-
the independent counsel law?
She's got an
You think that is itself a cover-up? You think that's itself a cover-up?
No, it's not a cover-up.
Is she using it to cover?
No,
It is
Is
her
she using it to shield?
She has a vision problem. She cannot see the forest because all these trees are in front of her.
Here's another reason why she should appoint an independent counsel. She has a conflict of interest because the Dole campaign may have violated the law, and therefore, for her to investigate Dole is a conflict of interest.
Let her do her work and get an investigation done at the Justice Department.
Give me your list of probable 1996 presidential election crimes and or abuses, Fred Barnes.
Well, certainly there was the Chinese connection. Secondly, there was the conspiracy to evade the campaign spending ceilings. And
We've achieved the first ever supersonic run.
break. Lindbergh flying the Atlantic was incredible. So was Aldrin and what's his name on the moon. But look, this isn't even comparable.
Yeah, what's his name?
This isn't even Armstrong. This isn't even comparable to Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier, the first man.
With the F-15?
Yeah, this is like winning the Preakness.
How do you account for this British volubility? Have you heard the phrase mad dogs and Englishmen in the noonday sun? Well, did that do it? The desert heat do it to them?
It's been a long time since wins. This is like winning the Preakness, and that's about it.
I have a feeling we have a little Irish prejudice here against the Brits. I think it was a, you know, it was an accomplishment. Come on,
supposed to be known for their understatement and reserve.
Well, no longer. Millions of dollars to build this car, rocket car. It did what it was supposed to do. So great, so fine.
Don't you understand? It's been a bad year for the empire. The Union Jack no longer flies over Hong Kong.
Yes, Princess
so they
Di
have to recover somehow.
John, I have had cars pass me on the Beltway around Washington. They were going faster than that thing.
Well, this is a significant achievement, but putting it on the level with Lindbergh is a little bit like pretending the Falklands War was the last great war.
You know, Breedlove, the American, will beat that record this coming year.
You know that if that car had crashed, Pat, it would have looked something like your necktie. So are you going to say anything else to defend the Brits?
He's the gutsy guy.
No,
the driver's a gutsy guy.
I've said, you know, the Brits will have this record for a little while.
Little
and the American will do it, take it over.
Is there any other explanation? What about Monty Python?
What about it?
You think that heritage has affected this at all?
No, they're just nuts.
Anything that helps Tony Blair, I'm for. He doesn't bring home the gold in the Olympics. Let him tout this for a while. Make the Brits feel good. Make up for the foibles of the royal
losing
family.
The colonies.
How do you think Blair is doing, Pat?
He had a rough week in Ireland. They had a rough week in India.
You mean for his handshake?
Well, no, in India, they're fooling around that Kashmir thing, which is a mistake. And I think that, frankly, the handshake, I'm not sure that was a wise thing to do.
He shook hands of Jerry Adams.
That's right. That's right.
Mistake?
Well, do you want peace or don't you want peace? You know, it's like Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin shaking hands. It had to happen. This should happen, too.
Predictions, Freddie.
John, the highway transportation bill called ICE-T, you know what that stands for, right?
Yeah.
ICE-T, I-S-T-E-A?
Yeah.
What?
What, do I have to reconstruct it for you now?
John, it is the
Interstate.
No, Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act. You blew it. Anyway, it will be voted on this week in the Senate. Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky will try to strike to remove the set-asides for so-called developing businesses for minorities from there. He will fail.
Boy, this is an electrifying
right,
prediction.
All that build-up and not much of a punchline.
What's going to happen in that Boston with that ridiculous situation up there? Billions of dollars into that superhighway over the city.
Indictments.
Indictments?
Sure.
To begin with. Go ahead.
I get a turn here? Okay. White House blitz next week on education because those genius Republicans on Capitol Hill are now holding America's right to read hostage, a tutorial program, an innocuous tutorial program for kids.
Nobody will know how to read.
The 1998 giant trade battle will be over the multilateral agreement on investments, which is a huge GATT NAFTA for Goldman Sachs, Citicorp. It's being secretly negotiated in Paris. When it hits, the Republicans better have their no fast track.
On IRS reform, the president will be repudiated by his own Democrats on the House Ways and Means Committee who will want an independent commission to oversee the IRS.
The Indians in 5. Next week, President Clinton comes back from his Latin American trade mission with his fast-track bill languishing in Congress. Can fast-track be saved? The answer is yes.